I got to understand myself more way back then. And it was then I realized that I do have these traits. Some of them are my superpowers, the perseverance, the push, the control, the focus. But the other ones that get beyond that, perfectionism, I've been able to use the neuroplasticity and change my habits incrementally to be able to say, no, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. And then you slowly, you change your habits into a way that keeps you safe.
Hi, I'm Naomi Murphy, and this is the Locked Up Living podcast, where we talk with a wide range of people about harsh aspects of institutional life.
We also explore some of the ways to overcome them and to grow and develop. I'm David Jones. So join us every Wednesday morning, 6 o'clock UK time, for a fresh podcast.
So today you're going to hear from Terry Hyde, who's a psychotherapist / counsellor. Terry started dancing age 6, gaining a 5-year scholarship to the Royal Academy of Dance at the age of 10. He joined the Royal Ballet at age 18 and subsequently joined London's Festival Ballet as a soloist, playing roles such as Dr. Coppelius in Coppelia, Sancho Panza in Don Quixote, and the headmistress in Graduation Ball. Terry left the ballet world to explore other artistic genres and performed in musicals in London's West End, in film and on TV. On retiring from performing, Terry set up as a business manager for people in all areas of the performing arts. On selling the business 15 years later, and inspired by the realisation that many of the people he'd worked with had also sought his advice on personal issues, he retrained as a psychotherapist. Terry founded the counsellingfordancers.com in 2017 and has been working to support the unique needs of dancers in relation to their mental health ever since. In 2021, he created the Help for Dancers app and the Dancers Personal Development series of eBooks and e-courses. In 2021, Terry won the One Dance UK Dance Healthcare Practitioner Award, and in 2022 was invited onto the advisory board at Point Magazine. Terry presents interactive mental health self-care workshops for dancers, both in person and virtually, and these proactive workshops help support dancers' mental well-being, teaching them how to be mentally fit and emotionally strong. I'm really pleased you're able to join us today, Terry. Thanks for coming along.
Thank you very much, Naomi and David. Thank you for inviting me.
Hello, Terry. I'm very pleased to meet you today. Terry, you've had a terribly interesting career, which is also quite varied, isn't it? You've had 3 different careers, although there's a thread that weaves them all together. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how you got into the first career that you had, which was becoming a highly proficient dancer.
Well, Naomi read out my bio, and I think that's sort of self-explanatory, but I think I could pad it out probably for about half an hour, but I'll try just to give you 30 seconds of it. And starting dancing at 6 years old, as soon as I started, I realized that is what I want to do. It was a real sort of feeling of vocation. That's it. I want to be a performer. And it just all developed from there. And it was heads down, and I just fired away. I'm seeing similar things in dancers that are coming for therapy and also in the workshops of the same mindset. And I'm looking for someone to do some research on this theory. Was I on the neurodiverse spectrum at age 6? And that is why I went for something like ballet. I mean, my mother took me to ballet classes, but was I there looking at something that's very black and white? Because especially ballet training, not necessarily other things like tap or musical theatre, but ballet is so precise, very much like gymnastics, swimming, ballroom, very black and white. You're either right or you're wrong. And going into something like that, you're either attracted to it because of the glamour and the lights and the dancing, etc. And then those traits are then exacerbated to create a higher level of ADHD and autism. And so when people come to me for anxiety and etc., I get them to do it. We call it a quiz, the ADHD and autism quiz, because it is basically one of the tests that people will go through for a diagnosis. But it's just to give them an idea, but also to work out what their power is, what's their superpowers out of these neurodiverse traits. So I've gone way off what you're going to talk about, but I just wanted to explain that because it comes into the fact that those 2 neurodiverse disorders need control. And so the control in ballet class, ballet rehearsals and performances per se need the control from those different traits. When there's no control, that's when anxiety comes in. When people haven't got control of their lives, as we saw from the first, well, not just the first one, but all the lockdowns that we've had over the few years ago, the anxiety levels shot up because people were out of control. Those with a flexible mindset, I know psychologists call them growth mindset, but I call it flexible because I work with dancers, flexible body, flexible mindset. So those with a flexible mindset or a growth mindset really did well in those, thinking up new business lines, etc. So the workshops are meant to do a proactive approach by getting people to have more of a flexible mindset and to reduce the anxiety and the depression that comes from too much anxiety. And as I said to you just a moment ago, I'm way off what you were going to talk about. I just wanted to make that point that dancers, so ballet dancers that go through this elite training that I went through and the elite performing are so fixed in their mindsets. And that's what creates a lot of perfectionism, injuries, because you're pushing yourself too far and you're tired and you get injured. And I'm sure those that are watching who are in different like sports, athletics, anything like can see exactly the same thing with their clients or patients.
It's a really interesting observation, Terry. And I suppose if anyone is listening, it sounds like you were inviting collaboration to explore this hypothesis, because you seem to be saying that maybe there's something about certain forms of body work, whether that be dance or other sports, that encourages that is a particularly appealing to people who might be neurodivergent. But also, I think I caught in your first point, you were perhaps suggesting that dance may in fact exacerbate that way of being.
Yes, yeah, because I've done the tests, not the proper diagnosis tests, all of the tests, but I'm just below the criteria. And so I understand it. But because I've understood it for such a long time, as part of my psychotherapy training, I did 4 years of weekly therapy. That was what we had to do, clear ourselves out, understand what it's like to sit in the patient's chair. So I got to understand myself more way back then. And it was then I realized that I do have these traits. Some of them are my superpowers, the perseverance, the push, the control, the focus. But the other ones that get beyond that, perfectionism, I've been able to use the neuroplasticity and change my habits incrementally to be able to say, no, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Honestly, Terry, it doesn't matter. And then you slowly, you change your habits into a way that keeps you safe.
It's all very interesting. I went to see Turandot at the Royal Opera House last week, and I've seen that production lots and lots of times, but due to the fact that they were nearly booked up, I had to buy seats very near the front. And so I really focus on the dancing in that production. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a lot of dancing, lots of dancing production numbers. And I was really struck by just the kind of things you're describing, really, the absolute perfection of every action, from the movement of the legs to the tiny, gentle undulations of the hands and the fingers. And I guess that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, and everything has to be on time as well.
Yes, precisely. And all at the same time. Yes, it's really quite extraordinary for an amateur like me. But what you're saying is there's many, many hours of hard work goes into developing that kind of perfect performance.
The issue at the moment, and I'm a great vocal advocate for this, is to change the way that students are taught ballet. So it's all very Eastern European that is coming over to Western Europe and the States, Australia, etc., the rest of the world. And it has to be a more supportive way of training rather than you do this. You can't speak in the studio because I'm telling you, I know what's right, and you've got to do it this way. And if you're wrong, and we were corrected all the time, but with no compliments. So we grew up thinking that we're not good enough. So there's low self-esteem already to start with. So you're trained in fear, You go through your training in fear, all different reasons, not pleasing your parents, not pleasing the teachers, not pleasing the examiner, not pleasing the audience. Then you go into the profession and you have to please the artistic director, the choreographer. So you go through a whole life from age, some people start at 3. I started at 6. I retired when I was 29. So all that time was work in fear. And then the transition out of dance, out of performing, you fear what's ahead of you. But you don't realize how many transferable skills that you've got. And so in these workshops, this is what I talk about. I do the coaching of transitions for dancers, for professional dancers. And I think I've gone off what I was going to say, David, from what you were saying. Oh, that's right. It was the training all the way through. And it's severe sometimes because of the way of the training. So advocating now for a more supportive way of training and using at least the same amount of compliments as the teachers are giving in corrections to be able to balance it out. Otherwise, people in my era, and even now, some of, as I said, the Eastern European training, the Russian training that's spread to the Eastern European, are very severe. I don't want to know about your injuries. I don't want to know about your emotions. You leave all of that outside the studio door. All I want to see is dance. And that is the sort of atmosphere of fear that's created in a studio.
So it could be experienced as neglectful, if not a bit abusive at times. I mean, if you're thinking about very young children being subjected to constant criticism with very little praise, do we set people off dancing too young?
No. I mean, dancing and movement is excellent for well-being. It's just the teaching methods that create the wrong ideals within that environment. But, children go along because they like to jump around to music, whether it's in time or not, it doesn't matter, but it's an enjoyable thing. And as the teaching goes on and you're getting older and older, you need to pass your exams, etc. You get those that have a flexible mindset saying, I don't like this, I'm leaving. And so you lose so many people that could really have been good performers, but because of the way of the training, they can't stand it. They drop out. And that's what I'm saying. It's funneled. Neurodiversity is then funneled right the way up into vocational schools because they're the only ones that say, yes, I need to do this. This has got to be right. Black and white thing.
So I'm just thinking about what you've been saying there, because the comment you made earlier about training in fear for those long is a very powerful observation, of course. And I was wondering what makes the difference between those who drop out and those like yourself who stuck at it.
Well, maybe because I'm a belligerent so-and-so and I wanted to get where I wanted to get to. And I'd stuck with it. And I think these are neurodiverse traits. That's what I want. That's what I'm going to go for. And it's very much like, some of the interviews I've been hearing from businessmen, multi-millionaires or billionaires, they say, that's what I want. And I'm going to go for it. I'm not a multi-millionaire, not even a millionaire. But that's perseverance. That's the target. That's what I want. And when I left, I had to leave show business to look after my 2 children for personal reasons. And so I didn't finish my career. I wanted to go on. I was doing really well in West End shows, starting to get good parts. But I had to give all that up. I went into financial services and sales to do a day job. Don't give up your day job, we were told. And then I set up the business management organization. So it was that drive. So the drive that I used for ballet training, I used for the outside and for the rest of my life. I just persevered and pushed. It was just before lockdown. The universe said to me, you're pushing yourself too hard. And I slipped on some pigeon poo and whiplashed my neck, and I was out for 2 months. In other words, the universe put me on my back, and I realized I had to stop doing that. So I cut down all my hours. I only see patients Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday now, Monday and Fridays. I've got meetings. Like today's Friday. And so I've pushed back a bit, only seeing a few patients now, cut those down, and also going out I haven't gone abroad again because I used to travel around the US doing workshops for dance companies and studios there. So I'm just doing the UK, taking the plane around, taking it really easy.
So I didn't quite understand why you gave up dancing. Did you say it's because of financial reasons or?
No, it's for personal reasons, which I'm not going to talk about, but I had to look after my 2 children. And therefore, I had to get myself a day job. I couldn't go touring around the country or abroad. I know I had West End shows and things like that. And so that's why I gave up.
What was it like? What was it like to give up a career that you loved? Because I think that's another thing that often happens for athletes in whatever sports, is that someone might just get to an age where they're not as fit or as fast anymore, so they're retiring off time, earlier than other people might be, or if they encounter an injury. So people might retire early for a whole host of reasons, but I wonder what it was like for you to have to retire at that point in life.
But it wasn't until I did those 4 years of weekly therapy, when I was trained to be a psychotherapist, that I realised I was going through 3 to 4 years of a grieving process. And I didn't realise it then. Because I said, I just put my head down, right, I'm going to start this business, I'm going to build that up. People in show business would trust what I'm doing, etc. So that was really the focus of it. So I didn't work through the grieving process at all. I would hear music on, ballet music or something like that, or music from the theatre, and I would walk out the room. I don't realise what I was doing. It's just an unconscious thing. I don't like this. I have a feeling in my stomach, lots of other things like that. So all my mates were still on television then. And that's when, in those days, you'd have 12 dancers, six guys, 6 girls. And then all my mates still working. I was like, I can't watch that. And it wasn't until that time, the 4 years of weekly therapy, that I realised, and that's when I started grieving. It all came out. So I was holding on to it for all those years. And, as a therapist, you'll know that people in middle age may have lost a partner or a husband or a wife, whatever, years ago. And because they had to deal with all the estates and things like that, they forgot about grieving, or they just set it aside. I set it aside, I'll do it later. And then they become ill, but they don't know why. And you work out that it was the loss of something, whatever it was, loss of the job, loss of the career, loss of identity. And I think that's what I'm getting now with a lot of dancers that are going through a transition period. And with the lockdown, they also, it's not a case of taking early retirement, but they realize, I've only got a couple of years to go. I haven't been working in these 2 years. I think I got to give up now and just look for something else. And they just look for something else, but they don't realize they're losing an identity that right from an early age. So they may be in their 30s or their late 20s, wanting to do something else, but they may have started 15 years. So that that's their identity for 15 years. And they're losing that identity. So it's working through with patients regarding that. And so I had to do that myself as a realization when I was having therapy myself.
So you retired as a dancer. You went into financial services with the same kind of determination, drive, and ambition as you had when training to be a dancer. And then at some point, you changed your mind and wanted to develop into a psychotherapist. Is that right? How did you go about doing that?
So I did a year's training of financial services and then set up my own business. It was called Personal and Business Management for people in show business. So it's not just dancers and actors and singers. It was lighting designers, theatre designers, all different types. In fact, I even got 2 dentists because they were dentists of clients of mine in show business. So I then went to some of the agents that I knew when I was working, and they said, oh, yeah, great. Can you do our books? Because I was also doing books. So I had to then bring in bookkeepers and an accountant to look after that side of the business. I dealt with the investment and pensions and business advice in that respect. So I had like a half a dozen high-profile, well-known actors and actresses and dancers and artistic directors. And all the rest were the bookkeepers were doing their people's VAT and their tax if they weren't limited companies, but the accountant would do limited companies. And that's I built up around for 15 years. Now, a lot of the people, when I'd either go to get all the paperwork from them or we had a business meeting, a lot of the clients would offload their personal issues on me. So I obviously got one of those spaces that people would just offload things on. And it was when I sold the business, I gave myself an early retirement of a couple of years, and then I got bored. And I thought, do you know what? I'd really like to know what to do with all this information that people give me. And that's when I trained as a psychotherapist. So it was, pun intended, it was a leap from dance to business management to psychotherapy. Obviously, all in time.
Yes, you've got all the skills I wish I had, Terry. I'm very envious of you. So what psychotherapeutic models were you drawn towards?
I think from a sort of spiritual point of view, it was Jungian psychotherapy. So I mean, my basic training was a Jungian psychodynamic psychotherapist. But I veered away from just being the whiteboard and sitting in silence. So there was more sort of person-centered coming in on that. I did a course in CBT as well to form part of what I can offer the patients. So it's not a one-size-fits-all at all. I mean, I can't remember the word at the moment. I don't advocate CBT as a standalone therapy. I use CBT techniques to help with the symptoms. And then as a psychotherapist, work with what's going on underneath so that the symptoms don't appear again. So I'm not putting CBT down per se, but just as the way that the NHS use it, just to sort of speedily get rid of the symptoms. Bye-bye, you're well, okay, don't come back. I'm me being cynical here. You're going to get a lot of letters about this, aren't you?
I think that view is probably widely shared, actually, Terry, that the anxiety of the way it's been turned into the sort of major industrial part of NHS mental health. So anyway, so
something that may apply to you. Sorry to interrupt, David, but I just thought, what's the title of the podcast again?
Locked Up Living.
What was I saying about studios and the dance? It's very much so, isn't it?
Yeah.
You do what I tell you. Type of thing.
Yeah, and certainly we've had a couple of guests on who've spoken about how, although David and I both worked in prisons, which is kind of like where our background, where our interest came from, we've had, guests make observations about being locked up can have all sorts of meanings, really, in terms of how people are imprisoned within their own minds or don't have access to their emotions.
I've been in prison a couple of 3 times, so twice for 24-hour watch, because I worked in for 6 months when I was doing my master's degree. Worked in a psychiatric unit for 6 months. And here on the Isle of Wight, right opposite the hospital, is the Isle of Wight prisons. Albany, Parkhurst, and another one, I can't remember, but they're called the Isle of Wight prisons. So I'd spent a couple of evenings, overnights in prison, keeping 24-hour watch on suicide watch. And then visiting a prison and a remand centre when this is not on the bio, but I was a magistrate for 14 years, worked in the family court and in the criminal court, both sitting as chair as well, like 2 wings. So it was interesting as a psychotherapist in a family court, hearing all what the Americans call BS that the barristers were saying about their. I'm thinking, no, really, where have you got that from? And so sometimes verbally I would bang the partners' heads together, because no one's going to believe what they're saying a lot of the time. They're trying to get one up on each other because that's the way their relationship was. And I did for some years do couples counselling, but that just got very frustrating as well. So it's just one-to-ones now.
So you never fancied being a dance therapist?
Oh, now there you go. Dance therapy, I don't think, is for dancers. I think dance movement therapy is for the general population because dancers are so specific about how they're trained and what they do. And what came up the other day, actually, in a therapy session, was one of the dancers said she had an injury. So she went to the physiotherapist, and the physiotherapist gave her some movement, some exercise. And she said she realized, she said, was that right? Did I do that right? How many times do you want me to do it? And the physiotherapist, it doesn't matter how many times, just do it. And this is the issue with dance movement therapy. For dancers, they wouldn't do it. You have to be free. You've got to release the traumas that are in your body. It doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter whether you're in time with the music. Just do it.
I can see how that might clash. I can see how that might clash, Terry, but I suppose it's making me think a little bit about, for instance, when perhaps somebody's got perhaps you've got a woman who's got a history of being sexually abused by a man. People then say, well, you need to have a female-only therapist, not a man, when in fact maybe they need the man in order to confront the very issues that are there. And I suppose I'm just wondering whether dancers might actually get benefit from working with a dance therapist who's looking for something quite different to address some of the rigidity of, what their history brings with them into that situation.
The thing is, you see, but yes, they need me. And I'm trying to get other dancers that are going through a transition to start counseling. I've got two dancers now. One is just finishing their counseling training and another one is just about to start in September because I want to start referring dancers that come to me. I get probably 50% of my patients are from the US and the rest are from UK and Europe. I've got one from Australia, which is very difficult timing. So I do need more dancers to become counsellors or psychotherapists. But so many dancers are training to be dance movement therapists. And I take your point, Naomi, but I think it's a totally different thing. Dance movement therapy is to help relieve the traumas. And yes, okay, they're females and they get on with females. But, I don't advertise at all. Yes, I've got a website. So people come on there, they email me. They know I'm a male. They know I've been a professional dancer. That's what attracts them to me. Now, obviously, I don't know if anyone says, oh, he's a male.
Sorry. I suppose I was trying to use an analogy there that actually maybe sometimes the thing that feels hardest to do might actually offer most potential for growth. So actually, as a dancer, to go for therapy in a way of dancing, which is totally different to what you've been inculcated into, might actually offer, making the freedom to make mistakes, for instance, or the freedom to not have rules. I was thinking that maybe that would offer scope for growth. But I also heard you saying that you actually have lots of clients, you're looking for people to refer to. And I suppose I wondered how you realised there'd be enough of a gap in the market just to cater for dancers in the first place. Was it very obvious to you that dancers as a population do have these psychological issues?
So what happened was it was 7 years after I'd done my 450 hours to get my ticket. 7 years after that, a local lady who was a retired dancer was discharged from the psychiatric unit and found out about me because she was told that they didn't have a psychotherapist in their trust. You need a psychotherapist. And so she found me by word of mouth. And I realized sort of a few sessions in, so I only treated her for about 6 months, a few sessions in, that a dancer needs a dancer to understand what they had been through, first of all as a child, and then into the profession, and understanding all that. So when I get patients come in, one of the first questions I say in the first session is, have you had previous therapy? If they have, I say, what has helped about it? Most of them say nothing really, because in the first few sessions, I had to explain so much, I just got fed up and didn't go back again. So it's only very rarely. And this is what worries me about the schools and the dance companies having just therapists, having counsellors, using the local counsellor or high street counsellor, whatever you want to call them. I'm not putting them down. I'm just saying you don't have the knowledge. I'm going to be building a course. So hopefully, probably by the end of this year, I'm going to build a course so it's a CPD course for trained counsellors and psychotherapists and psychiatrists and psychologists, whoever wants to get it, whoever wants to do it, on this is what a dancer's mindset is. This is how I've been treating them in therapy sessions, so that they have some idea that if they do want to go and answer the call from the Royal Ballet School or wherever, they have more of an understanding. I've got these kids, these parents are contacting me from all schools saying these counsellors don't know what they're doing with dancers, and so they're coming to pay for them privately. It is not right. That means that there's not enough counsellors to do it. And that's why I was so joyful to find these two counsellors that wanted to train.
I wonder whether like other sports, whether it's helpful for the dancers to be able to go independently though, because I think what I've noticed in other sports is that athletes are very frightened of going through official channels because they worry they won't get selected. If they follow the club's recommendations, it'll become known that they've got a psychological issue, and actually finding their own therapist might feel a more comfortable approach, but it sounds like it's hard to get the balance right between knowledge of the industry and independence and autonomy.
You're right. It's exactly the same, even in musical theatre as well. And that's what I'm saying about the fear. The fear goes right the way through, from vocational up to and into the profession. There is that fear that someone will find out. There's also built in a fear of showing a sign of weakness, whether it's emotional weakness, whether it's physical weakness. So this is why we're told at an early age, you work through your pain. It's a tough career. You've got to be tough now. You're going to go into a career like that. So you work through your pain, which means you're going to be injured. And you've got to keep your mouth shut because you're injured, because otherwise they're going to take you off the cast list. And it's horrendous, the way that the fear is generated.
That brings us very nicely to something that I was really curious about, Terry. So I'm really interested to understand about the relationship between dancers and emotion, because in many ways, dance shares commonalities with other sports, as you say, in terms of athletes often using their sports, their body to squash out emotions. But we associate exceptional dancing with emotional expression, don't we? And inducing an emotional reaction in the people watching. I mean, I'm sure when David spoke about his trip to the theatre last week, what you hope for is when you go to watch ballet or any of these other performing arts is to be emotionally stirred. So how does that work then in terms of evoking and expressing emotion, but also squashing emotion at the same time?
So if grandma died the day before, there's a fear of actually saying, I'm sorry, I don't feel like coming in today. So you go in, and there's a thing, if you've had any other actors or anyone else, called, you just do it. You go on and do it. And the adrenaline just carries you through, that sort of thing. So that's the second part of your question. The first part of your question is, it's the same sort of, it's a motivational emotion that is created. So for instance, in Giselle, so Giselle dies and there's a mad scene. It's called the mad scene. So she goes mad. And at the end of that act, that's the first act, she dies on stage and she gets up. Okay, let's go another cutscene. And there's no sort of support there for someone like that. There's no, are you all right? You know, you're okay. And it's that same thing that I was saying about me. All right, okay, I had to give up. That's what I'm going to do next. So you just think, okay, I've got now 15 minutes. I've got to get changed. I've got to and the adrenaline just carries you through. And the emotions are pushed aside. And then after the show, it hits you because you're just letting go there, because you don't need to keep that adrenaline going.
Sounds like it could be really quite hard to know what you feel, what to feel, you know, same as I suppose when you're talking about actors as well. But if you're having to have your own emotional response to your own life and then also produce emotions for a part, I guess it could turn you quite crazy, really.
It is. I mean, the thing was, when I left ballet, the first show that I did was West Side Story. So the UK tour of West Side Story. Fantastic show. Best show that I've ever been in. It's not really like the film. It's better than the film. And so at the end, I would say more than half of the performances, the cast was in tears. It's bringing up the emotions in me already. Because everything, the whole energy of that last scene is incredible. And then we just go off and have a takeaway or and it's broken down. And you have to sort of let it go. There's the silence in the dressing room after that. Not many of us were talking. And then it's slowly sort of some that would come out of it quicker than others. But yeah, it caught me then talking about it.
Well, as you were talking, it was making me think of sensory motor psychotherapy, where there's a recognition that we can end up with some of our emotions stuck in our body, and the need to offer up exercises to allow whatever emotion is to come to completion. And just thinking that actually it may be that dance and acting would benefit from making use of those kind of strategies more generally as part of their, closing off the performance for, once the show's finished, but actually closing off the evening's work by engaging in some of these activities to allow the emotion to come to completion.
It sounds a good idea, but the only thing is that some people have got families to go to. I mean, I lived in Wimbledon at the time, so I had to get from the West End over to Waterloo and take a train back home. Otherwise, it's going to be really late. So it really depends on how long these exercises are, whether they're by thought or by physicality, as to, people say, I don't care. But the thing is, they say, I don't care, and then they go off home. And then 20 years later, it's all affecting them. I'm 73 now. I retired when I was 29. I was doing West Side Story in 1972. And I still get emotional. But then, with those 4 years of therapy, I learned to break down the emotions and understand my emotions a lot more, which is what's helping with patients. And so I understand what you're saying, Naomi, but most people won't do that. I think maybe no, I didn't really think so. No, I think because we finish shows so late, 10:30. So the long 3 actors, Sleeping Beauty, Swan Lake, 10:30, finished. Takes half an hour to get yourself out. It's 11 o'clock. You've still got the adrenaline going. So on the train journey, car journey, whatever, home, that's when you start coming down. Then you have to eat something. Can't eat before the show, a decent meal. You don't want to dance with a full stomach. And so there's such a wind down there. And I think it's the wind down that helps a bit, but not really, as you saw the feeling that came up for me.
But you're reminding me of the importance of applause, Terry, because you know how at the end of a performance, particularly a performance that's been very tense, there's a second or two of silence, and then the applause starts, and it becomes an act of catharsis, and the audience need it, and certainly you can see that the performers need it too.
It's a wonderful vibration, the sound and feeling of applause as well. And I think I was lucky enough to all the shows that I did generated a lot of applause. I was in a show called Billy that starred Michael Crawford. So not Billy, it was a musical of Billy Lyle, not Billy Elliot. And I was in that for 2.5 years. And 8 shows a week it was. So 2 shows on Wednesday or Thursday, I can't remember which, and 2 shows on Saturday. And every time the applause was wonderful. And it was just, as I say, it was the vibration in the body, the sound of that, and resonating in the head. And it does release. It was a joyous show anyway. So there was no emotional upsets in it at all.
Given what we know about the vagus nerve, it sounds like this could be something really interesting to study there as well, couldn't there, in terms of applause and emotional regulation, like singing, humming, those sorts of effects that we know are quite soothing.
And with it, and you're saying that there are the simple exercises for releasing the vagus nerve as well. And of course, dancers can do that because the girls are out.
So I don't know how we're doing for time, but within sport, we've increasingly seen, Terry, that organisations have covered up abusive behaviour by people in positions of power, often the coaches. Is this something that goes on within dance as well? I think there was a film called Black Swan, wasn't there, which took up this theme.
Yes, but nearer to our shores, Ballet West in Scotland a few years ago, I think that was before lockdown, the principal's son, who was one of the main teachers, had a number of, they were all over 16. The girls were all over 16, but he groomed them. And there's a court case coming up. It's been put off twice. So I think it's in May now. Oh, and I can't remember his name. But I'll use public knowledge so I can say this. But and then there was English National Ballet School some years ago. One of the teachers there was in prison for 8 years. And yes, it happens. And it's a very difficult thing for the principals, as in the principals of the schools, and the artistic directors of the companies, because a lot of these people are well known. So you've got Harvey Weinsteins, and this is what's happening here. I mean, a lot of the, you can call it this. Some of those are obviously sexual abuse, but a lot of it is coercive control. So narcissistic leaders of schools or dance companies, and they use all of the narcissistic traits of coercive control and gaslighting, etc., which is emotional abuse. But the board trustees of either the schools or the dance companies are frightened of losing face of the name of their company or their school, and they won't report it. So even if it's reported, say, oh no, you must be imagining it, or something like that. But this is not the case. So I'm trying to get people to understand that they have a right to do this, and the right to stand up to bullies, to abuse, whether it's verbal, sexual, emotional, and even financial. If you're not being paid well, you're being paid badly. That's the other part of the abuse as well. And they have a right to do it, and especially in this country, because coercive control, I don't think it's been tried in court yet, but coercive control can also be from businesses. The coercive control in the law courts gives the list of things. So they're only thinking about it in an intimate relationship. But I'm sure it could be tried that way with emotional abuse, financial abuse, mental abuse from bosses or from principals of dance schools.
Such an interesting observation, Terry. David, you've got a hand up. I don't know if that's intentional.
No, it's not.
I think it's a new feature on Zoom. If you raise your hand too quickly, it puts your hand up. But finally, Terry, we can hear that actually the work that you've been doing involves working with some quite strong emotion, and perhaps also sometimes seeing the seedier, more sinister side of an area of culture that you're clearly also very passionate about at the same time. How have you protected your own emotional health when doing this kind of work, and what do you do to keep yourself replenished and nourished?
Well, I suppose that encompasses a lot. It encompasses the fact that as a BACP member, I have to have an hour and a half of clinical supervision a month. There is on and off counselling as well. Gardening, walks. What else do I like doing?
You still dance?
Argentine tango and salsa. Gently as an old man. With style, of course. I've got 6 children and 10 or 11, this is terrible, 10 grandchildren. So there's all of those sort of things that are going on in my life as well. And I do leave the sessions, close the office door.
Thank you. That was great. Thanks very much, Terry.
Okay.
Really good to meet you, Terry, and thank you for being so tolerant with my inabilities today.
Not at all, David. It happens.